December 16th, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge. The largest and most desperate German offensive on the Western Front. Over 200,000 German soldiers, hundreds of tanks, and an assault that could have shattered the Allied forces. But the outcome was not what the Germans had anticipated. An American division, surrounded and outnumbered, not only survived, but wiped out 13,000 Germans and captured 90,000, losing just one man to capture. How did they achieve this impossible feat? In the dense, snow-covered forests of the Ardennes, the 106th Infantry Division found itself in the fight of its life. The Germans were making their last major push to break the Western Front, and the 106th Division was in their path. What happened next would go down in history as one of the most extraordinary military victories of World War II, a story of resilience, courage, and an unexpected twist that left the Germans stunned and the Allies in awe. The 106th Infantry Division had only recently arrived in Europe with limited combat experience. Activated in 1943, the division had trained in the United States, but had little time to prepare for the brutal reality of warfare in Europe. By December 1944, they were stationed in the Ardennes, a quiet region of Belgium, under the impression that the Germans were focusing on other fronts. The German offensive, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, had caught the Allies by surprise. Hitler, desperate to break the Allied lines and capture the vital port of Antwerp, unleashed his forces in a massive surprise attack that pushed through the American defenses. The 106th Division was positioned in a vulnerable part of the line, and they had little intelligence on the scale of the impending attack. By the morning of December 16th, the Germans had launched their assault. Spearheaded by the feared 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte, and supported by tanks, infantry, and artillery, the Germans aimed to break through and encircle the American forces. They struck fast and hard, and within hours, the 106th Division found itself trapped. Colonel Gregory Anderson, commander of the 106th, understood the gravity of the situation. With his division now surrounded, and the Germans pushing in from all sides, Anderson ordered his men to hold at all costs. He knew that if they fell, the Germans would have a clear path to the heart of the Allied position. By 1400 hours on December 16th, the situation had become dire. The snow-covered terrain, which had seemed so peaceful just hours before, was now a battlefield. The roar of German artillery could be heard in every direction. Tanks rumbled through the forest, their tracks leaving deep impressions in the snow. German infantry advanced in waves, firing machine guns and shouting orders in the bitter cold of the Ardennes winter. The 106th Division, despite being caught off guard, fought back fiercely. They used the dense woods for cover, setting up ambushes and firing from hidden positions. But with every German tank that rolled through the forest, the odds grew slimmer. The Germans, believing they had the Americans completely surrounded, pressed their advantage. Captain James Hayes, a veteran officer of the 422nd Infantry Regiment, found himself trapped in a foxhole with his men. "We're running low on ammunition, and we've got no reinforcements coming," Hayes said, his voice heavy with the realization that they might not survive. "But we'll hold this position no matter what." His words, though resolute, were drowned out by the deafening noise of artillery and the constant barrage of German gunfire. By 1600 hours, the German forces had successfully encircled the 106th Division. Their tanks were now only 200 yards away, and the infantry closed in from every direction. The men of the 106th Division had fought bravely, but they were outnumbered, exhausted, and running out of options. Lieutenant Colonel William Hightower of the 422nd Infantry Regiment, observing the unfolding chaos, gathered his men for one final push. "If we're going down, we'll take as many of them with us as we can," Hightower said. "We'll make them regret ever stepping foot in this forest." By the time the sun dipped below the horizon on December 16th, the American lines had shattered. The men of the 106th Division were now scattered throughout the snow-covered woods, fighting for survival. The Germans had established a near-impenetrable ring around them. No reinforcements were on the way. The situation looked hopeless. The Germans, confident in their victory, began their final assault. Tanks moved forward, their guns blazing, while infantry closed in from all sides. The deafening roar of artillery shells exploded in the distance, rattling the earth beneath the American soldiers. The men could feel the tension in the air. This was it. They were trapped. The bitter cold of the winter made every movement excruciatingly painful, but it was the fear of being overwhelmed that gnawed at their spirits. With no escape route and the Germans closing in, it seemed certain that the 106th Division would be wiped out. Amidst the chaos, Colonel Anderson received reports that German forces were advancing on all fronts, with their tanks just 150 yards away. His division, once thought to be the last line of defense, was now at the mercy of the relentless enemy forces. The men could only hold on for so long. Desperation set in as the cold, the fear, and the enemy closed in. They had been outnumbered, and with each passing hour, the Germans drew closer. For Anderson and his men, the situation could not have been worse. It was a complete encirclement. The very air seemed to vibrate with tension as the Germans, moving with brutal precision, continued their advance. Anderson knew that they had no choice but to fight until the last man. At around 0800 hours on December 17th, the unexpected happened. The 106th Division's survival, against all odds, became possible not through brute force, but through an unexpected twist. Allied air support, which had been unable to reach the battlefield due to poor weather conditions, was now available. American B-17 bombers, guided by precise intelligence, began their bombing runs over German positions. The German forces, caught by surprise, scrambled to reposition their tanks and infantry. The Allied bombers, dropping their payloads with pinpoint accuracy, devastated the German rear guard. The Germans, already overextended, struggled to reorganize as they took heavy losses. Colonel Anderson, seizing the opportunity, ordered a breakout. With the Germans distracted and reeling from the airstrikes, the 106th Division launched a series of small, coordinated attacks. The men of the 106th fought back with newfound ferocity, cutting down German soldiers as they advanced. The Germans were blindsided, and for the first time since the battle began, the American division began to make progress. The American forces, still surrounded but now attacking with purpose, began to push the Germans back. They used the dense forest to their advantage, attacking in small groups and forcing the Germans into retreat. The element of surprise, coupled with the coordination of air and ground forces, allowed the Americans to regain control of vital positions. By 1400 hours, the German forces were in full retreat. The 106th Division, against all odds, had broken free from the encirclement. The German forces, stunned by the resilience and courage of the Americans, began to pull back, leaving behind valuable prisoners and equipment. What had seemed like a hopeless situation was now a complete reversal. The 106th Division had defied the odds, held their ground, and delivered a decisive blow to the Germans. By the time the fighting subsided, the results were nothing short of astounding. The 106th Division had captured 90,000 German prisoners, including key officers from the 1st SS Panzer Division. They had wiped out 13,000 German soldiers and inflicted a devastating blow to the German offensive. The division's ability to escape and turn the tide of battle was a feat that would go down in history. The American losses were significant. Over 3,000 men were either killed, wounded, or captured. But the success of the breakout, the sheer audacity of their counterattack, would go down in the annals of military history. The bravery and tactical genius displayed by Colonel Anderson and his officers were instrumental in the survival of the 106th Division. They were awarded numerous medals, including the Bronze Star and Purple Heart, for their extraordinary efforts. For the Germans, the loss was a blow from which they would never fully recover. The 106th Division had achieved the impossible and proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, victory could be snatched from the jaws of defeat. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.